I would like to welcome everybody to our conference about the life and the work of Arthur Szyk. We only recently learned that our institute, the Polish Institute of Art and Science, received a grant to organize this event. And hence, there was a lot of improvisation and perhaps even some chaos in getting this together. Nevertheless, we managed to attract to Montreal two of the biggest specialists of Arthur Szyk works. Professor Aleksander Skotnicki from Jagiellonian University in Krakow and Irving Ungar from the Arthur Szyk Society, Burlingame, California. It is said that people who start out with an innocent interest in Szyk's opus quickly become fanatics. We at the Polish Institute of Art and Science in Canada have our own Szyk fanatic or fan, Stefan Władyszyuk, our librarian. And it was Stefan's idea to organize this conference and exhibition. I can hardly imagine how both could be realized without his enthusiasm and his dedication. We are sincerely grateful to our sponsors who made this event possible: the Senate of the Republic of Poland, the Embassy of the Republic of Poland in Canada, and the Polish Consulate in Montreal. General Consul is here among us. Our conference will open with a paper by Norman Ravin. He sent me an email today how to pronounce his name, because I always mispronounce it. So. Okay. From Concordia University in Montreal. His paper deals with Szyk's birthplace, the city of Łódź, Łódź. As you know, Łódź is the birthplace of many artists of Polish-Jewish origin: Arthur Rubinstein, Julian Tuwim, to name only these two, and of course, Arthur Szyk.
And Jan Karski.
And Jan, well, yeah. So, and I thought maybe Roman Polanski also, but he was born. He was No, he was born in Paris. He was born in Paris, yes. Yes. Okay, so Norman.
So there's just one fuss, that is to get this to open up properly. Because my thanks. The pictures are not so terrifically important, but they're nice, so be careful. So I'm not from far. I walked over from Concordia. Stan and I know one another from his conference on Bruno Schultz. And he was right that I'd be up to the task and interested to talk about the context that we can think of from the point of view of the city in the interwar period. So what I have to tell you will be of general interest and of contextual interest, though everyone after will tell you everything that you want to know and learn about Arthur Szyk. And I call it Łódź, open city, and I'll just play it safe and use the North American pronunciation, because you'll sense what it is that I imagined about the city, partly through travel and partly through thinking about this talk. Certain cities at particular times seem to symbolize great possibilities. Łódź, between the two world wars, might be seen as such a place. Having been at the borderland of empire and a World War I battleground, it was, one might argue, in a position to present itself as a cultural and economic engine in the newly independent Poland. It was a young city, unlike Poland's major urban centers. It had thrived with the investment of German textile weavers and an influx of German immigrants. The ever-present threat and damage imposed by Russian imperial policy had lessened in the mid-19th century with the cancellation of customs duties on Polish manufacture meant for Russian markets. While the Tsarist limitations on Jewish habitation and economic involvement in Russian cities drove tens of thousands of Jews west toward the environs of Łódź. The numbers associated with the 19th century transformation of the city are characteristic of a true boomtown. And my interest in the city comes in part from having grown up in the Canadian boomtown of our era, Calgary. Between the 1860s and the outbreak of World War I, the Jewish population of the city rose from roughly 6,000 to over 160,000. A gradual loosening of residency restrictions led Jewish settlement to spread from the traditional area around the adjacent town of Baut, or as the Jews would call it, Bayuti, as German industrialists led the way with the most major expansions of the textile industry. Jewish innovation and investment followed, so that before World War I, Jewish entrepreneurship in all fields had increased dramatically. Arthur Szyk's father was himself a textile factory director. His tenure marred during the 1905 Łódź insurrection, when a worker threw acid in his face, blinding him. World War I marked a turning point for the city. The war broke the city's economic link with Russian markets. German occupation brought looting and the stripping of factory materials. Liberation and national renewal oversaw a city population that had shrunk in size by as much as 40%. Still, with its economic growth slowed, the unusual ethnic divisions of the managerial and working class were maintained. Jews owned as many as half the major factories. Most factory workers were Poles, while Jewish weavers staked out a freelance economy in the tenement sweatshops, which were often located in the poorer neighborhood in which they lived. Proletarian movements proliferated, as did professional and trade organizations, Zionism, leftism, while Yiddish cultural organizations asserted themselves alongside the more mainstream cultural pursuits of an increasingly assimilated Jewish and middle-upper class. Remarkable variety and counter-proposal to the usual stereotypes about Jewish life in Poland. When one visits Łódź today, much of this history, that of the city's possible future in the interwar period, is untraceable. Piotrkowska, where Jewish merchant life thrived, is now a lovely major pedestrian thoroughfare. The Grand Hotel, recently refurbished in hipster glory, was the work of the major Łódź-based Jewish architect Gustav Landau Hutentiger. The large Jewish cemetery on the north side of the city provides mute record of the city's varied Jewish heritage in the interwar period. Traditionally, decorated Jewish gravestones with a shelf of books for men, candlesticks for women, are there in great number. And they stand alongside the kind of thing you see to my right, modern Hebrew language markers, and the entirely contemporary, even avant-garde stones marked in Polish, like that of the parents of Artur Rubinstein, as usual. One finds, too, the monstrous faux Greek tomb of the industrialist Israel Poznański, and the lovely Art Nouveau and modernist monuments of Yiddishists and Bundists. That one was a little broken when I visited last. The magnificent red brick campus that housed the Poznański Mills, its powerhouse, fire brigade, and workers' housing, has been redeveloped as a successful upscale shopping and entertainment complex with broad public spaces. In this way, the infrastructure of pre-World War II capitalist success has been refashioned in the image of our own habits of consumption and pleasure. In preparing this talk, another consideration occurred to me. So in fact, this was what I learned by thinking about things for today. In relation to our ability to know interwar Łódź, a few things work in favor of this goal. The city was not devastated by the Germans as was Warsaw. Baluti, the neighborhood of poor working class Jews before World War II, is largely intact. The tenements, road network, and back buildings have a quality of being somewhat lost in time, and Łódź overall has not been discovered by tourists in the fashion of Warsaw and Krakow. One flies into these cities while it's more straightforward to ride by train or car to Łódź from one of Poland's more popular tourist centers. The train ride from Warsaw offers a marvelous introduction to the Polish countryside, marked by the fanciful presence of things abandoned out of the past, castles, the seemingly derelict train station at the town of Radzivilo, the markings on a wall not far along the route that reads in heavy Yiddish script, Sztebel-Brodzisk. It occurred to me as I was introduced to the Jewish history of Łódź that my excellent guide, a 20-something ex-student of the University of Łódź who spoke entirely unaccented English, was entirely focused on conveying the city's history of occupation and degradation under the Germans during World War II. This history loomed so large in her mind, she knew it so well, had such excellent materials at hand to read from in her overfilled shoulder bag, that any possibility of the city's interwar character being revealed was overwhelmed by the sheer, dark weight of Łódź under the Nazis. The possibility of such a presentation, focused on the pre-war city, came up, I think, maybe once, as we stood on the street over which one of the ghetto's iconic wooden bridges passed, and Milena read from a ghetto diary, in which the writer stood upon the bridge, looking toward the Kosciuszko monument on the square where her pre-war family home stood. Łódź has gone through some effort to tell its interwar history in public art and monuments. Along the pedestrian blocks of Piotrkowska, it has installed impressive, full-sized bronzes of key figures from the city's past. The poet Tuwim sits on a bench, apparently open for conversation. Poznański, with his non-Jewish competitors, sits at a table on a street corner. These are fine landmarks, suggestive in an almost light-hearted way of the quality and variety of pre-World War II Łódź. One feels one could settle down with Magnets, or the poet, and engage them in a disquisition on the city's missed opportunities. Cultural activists, academics, and important figures in the Jewish community have gone further, as most of you know, with their annual festival of four cultures, meant to highlight aspects of the pre-World War II status quo of Polish, Jewish, German, and of course they also include Russian cultural influence. Łódź sits today at a kind of threshold, largely unmarked, even by memorials connected with its most notorious period under the Nazis. Its character and history as a Polish cultural borderland is, for a visitor at least, open to interpretation. The Baluti area, with an appropriate guide, offers itself as a remarkable backdrop for understanding the Łódź ghetto, Chaim Romkowski, and the senselessness of the German plan for Eastern Europe. But there's room, too, for another kind of memory tourism in the area, which would allow Poles and visitors to recover a sense of how Łódź operated as a boomtown, as a thoroughly modern industrial center, and as an open city inhabited by German and Jewish industrialists, Polish working class, a large intellectual class of assimilating Jews, alongside a spectrum of the religious and adherents of Hasidism. One avenue for recovering a sense of this period can be found in the life and work of Łódź-born Yiddish writer Chava Rosenfarb, who died in her adopted home of Lethbridge, Alberta, almost 2 years ago. Born in 1923 to working-class parents, whose home was devoted to the leftist cultural idealism of the Bund, her upbringing was representative of a large portion of Łódź's poorer interwar Jewish population. I came to know Rosenfarb late in her life and interviewed her in her Lethbridge living room under the gaze of a portrait of her ex-husband, Henry Morgenthaler, whom she knew in the ghetto. Some of her answers regarding her youthful intellectual makeup, her influences and education during the late 20s and early 30s were pleasant surprises. The authors who influenced her most, she said, were not the Yiddish classics, Ayal Peretz of Zamość or Sholem Aleichem of Kiev, but rather the novelist Stefan Zaromsky, novelist and poet Maria Konopnicka, and most importantly, the novelist Eliza Orzeszkowa. The latter obviously appealed for her detailed and sympathetic portraits from a Polish point of view of Jewish life. Orzeszkowa and Konopnicka died in 1910, while Zaromsky died in 25, making them all record keepers of the Poland into which Rosenfarb's age group was born and which saw destroyed by German occupation. As in the work of Szyk, Orzeszkowa pursued a creative position from which to imagine a Poland built on shared ethnic identities. Rosenfarb's all-girl high school, called Widza, had an almost entirely Jewish student body. But, she added, in describing it, the general atmosphere of the school was Polish. I took it to heart, and that's how I learned Polish literature and Polish language. Of the Łódź neighborhood where she grew up, Rosenfarb recalled both Jewish and non-Jewish neighbors, main street shops owned by both, and a divided language milieu offering both Yiddish and Polish as everyday languages. Rosenfarb's major novel, The Tree of Life, first published in Yiddish as Der Boim von Leben in 1972, bears the subtitle, A Trilogy of Life in the Łódź Ghetto. Scholarly attention has been paid to this latter aspect of its historical focus, to its detailed portrait of the wartime years of incarceration, and to key historical figures of the era, including the so-called King of the Jews, Mordechai Chaim Ramkowski. But the early stages of the novel capture the final days of Łódź's interwar period with great grace and sympathy. As one might expect, these have attracted little critical comment, maybe none. The first three chapters of The Tree of Life present a tableau of the key areas of Jewish life in the city. First, the mansions of the wealthy Jewish manufacturers, then the winding back streets of Baluti, and the hectic and elegant Piotrkowska. The novel opens with the portrait of Samuel Zuckerman, whose grandfather is said to have been, this is Rosenfarb, among the first Jews to leave the ghetto and settle downtown. He'd been one of the pioneers who had laid the foundations of the Jewish cotton trade and textile industry in town. The grandson of the pioneer, Samuel, who is her focus, studied at the town's most respected gymnasium, where there was a numerous clauses against Jews. A Jew being permitted to enter only after rigorous examination or through the back door by handing over a swollen envelope. A private tutor, an enlightened Jew and the best Hebrew scholar in town, visited the boy 3 times a week to enrich his knowledge of what it meant to be a Jew. Rosenfarb supplies the mature Samuel Zuckerman, circa the mid to late 30s, with a suitably complex Jewish-Polish identity. He refers to himself as a salon Zionist, meaning that a Jewish homeland would be of great advantage to the poor Jewish masses. But he himself was too deeply rooted in the country where he lived, in the city his grandfathers had helped to build, to be able to call any other place home. To express his love of Łódź, he quotes Tuvim's well-known quip, "Let Sorrento, Ganges, and Crimea fight for the crown of glorious beauty, but give me Łódź. Its dirt and smoke are much dearer to my heart." You see that translated differently in English in different sources. Zuckerman's love of his hometown, Rosenfarb tells us, extended to embrace the entire country. He was a devout Polish patriot. Among Zuckerman's compatriots, Polish-Jewish identity is combed over and examined as if under scientific examination. Think of this as taking place in the early 30s in the narrative of the book. Were the Jews good citizens of Poland, the disputants asked themselves, if they led lives of isolation, shunning any contact with Polish national life and culture? How could they be good Polish patriots if they considered themselves good Jews? And how was a Jew supposed to behave if he became a soldier and had to fight against another Jew, a citizen of an enemy country? This form of identity examination is not shared by the poorer Jews, whom Rosenfarb portrays with equal care and sympathy. There, economic and political developments have led people from traditional ways, but a kind of uneasy truce has been struck between old world observance and modern ideas. A lead character who is raising his family in Baluti, who has not yet joined the leftist Bund, feels sorry, in his words, that he clung so long to religion before coming to his senses. True, he did not regret the fact that he had sent his eldest to the cheder and the yeshiva, and was proud that his son's erudition included the scriptures, as well as the difficult chapters of Marx's Das Kapital. But his other sons had not been sent to cheder. They went to public schools and to the socialist children's organization, the SCIF. If he wanted them, so to speak, to suck in Bundism with their mother's milk, this was the way to do it. Here Rosenfarb sketches the social and political idealism of Poland's large population of leftist, Yiddishist Jews, many of whom believed firmly in the ability to assert, through their political and cultural affiliations, what in Yiddish was called doigkeit, here-ness, the idea that Jewish life could be successfully maintained in the Polish-Yiddish secular milieu. Rosenfarb fills out her sketch with a depiction of Baluti with its bazaar and fish market. So this is that area, but relatively nicely reconstructed as a kind of a tourist space, although in my visits there are very few tourists coming here. With its bazaar and fish market, horse thieves, streetwalkers, kosher matrons buying groceries, and the pious Jews going to synagogue, hosiery workers, knitters, school children, and beggars. Here the Tree of Life overcomes our tendency to look at the once Jewish neighborhoods of Łódź only through the prism of Nazi degradation. The spirit of the place returns, its crumbling, hard-bitten qualities alongside its intimacies. Baluti, as late as the 1930s, retained some of its original late 19th century village character. In the early chapters devoted to it, the Polish Lutomirska Street is said to be called Hokol Street by the Jews, a misspelling apparently of the name of a hotel that had once stood there. On Hokol Street, Rosenfarb writes, were old wooden cottages, as were most of the houses in the neighborhood. Here and there stood a fading stucco building with several stories in the style of the city. These houses had deep arched entrances leading into dingy backyards, walled in by 3 or 4 storied apartment boxes. Each of the latter had its own murky entrance, crooked staircase. Each floor had its own dark corridor, filled with the strong smells which escaped from beneath countless doors. Here the tenement poverty of a key thoroughfare in the city's Jewish slum is characterized via a Jewish joke, the mispronounced name of a structure, long gone, which is said to lend the street's dilapidation a certain romance. Rosenfarb presents a middle ground between the Zuckerman soirees and Baluti in the girls' school, Vidya, which she calls after her own experience. The girls are scolded by their teacher on the quality of essays on the subject, the writer closest to my heart. Rosenfarb's young main character, Rachel Eibeshitz, is grilled by her teacher for having chosen to write on Yitzchak Leibish parrots. He's the writer closest to my heart, Rachel offers from the back of the room, to which her teacher wonders if it is not an altogether questionable assumption that a jargon can have a literature and that people living shut up in a ghetto can be modern, let alone capable of producing modern literature. Rachel's teacher takes her view of Jewish culture one step further, using a rhetoric familiar from the early 20th century American view of the vanishing Indian. And she says, Jews are a people about to disappear from the face of the earth. The more intelligent ones among them, those aware of reality, have freed themselves of their anachronistic yoke. They've consciously incorporated themselves into the Polish nation. And this, my dear children, is the purpose of a school like ours, to help you in the process of inner and outer liberation. Here, late in Łódź's interwar window of opportunity, the idea of a culturally hybrid city, drawing on its very resources, has become a mirage. Jewishness, Polishness, religious identity, and language present conflict and heartbreak. One recognizes then, in motivations behind the contemporary festival of 4 cultures, great idealism, even romance, for a moment in Łódź's history that reached an impasse before the Germans arrived to obliterate much of what Jews and Poles had built for themselves. The contemporary idea of 4 cultures represents new developments and ideals over and above any representation of Łódź as it was before the war. And by reconsidering the Tree of Life alongside my meeting with Rosenfarb, I recognize my own wish to find a hopeful narrative, a Łódź Jewish childhood characterized by cultural crossings and the possibility of an open city. Today, in the old area called Baluti, in the pleasant restaurants of Manufaktura and the refurbished Poznański factory, a memory tourist continues to dream. Thanks.
I think it's my turn, am I right? Good afternoon. Let me express my gratitude before our presentation will start to all who make great job to organize this meeting devoted to our hero today, Artur Szyk. I would like to express my gratitude to Polish government who is supported by its institution, this meeting, and to the Polish General Consulate to Montreal for hosting me and providing me wonderful accommodations. Ladies and gentlemen, we just have heard about Łódź, about origin town of Artur Szyk, and it's so multicultural city, so no wonder we could say that Artur Szyk became a builder of the bridges between the nations, among the people of different religions, different countries. And his drawings against Nazis, which is my topic today, were done by person who already have his position in art, in political affairs, and he became well known before. He was one of the most memorable political caricaturists during World War II. And Artur Szyk, not very big man, but he was really, I would say in Polish, mocarz. In other words, he was very big man in terms of his art, what he has done. His parents came to Łódź from Moscow, and I cannot use my arrow because it's not screen, but you could see Artur Szyk here with his brother and his parents. Unfortunately, his brother and mother perished during occupation, German occupation in Poland. So we could say to some extent it was his personal revenge against Nazis, but of course he was doing his job against terror, against brutalism of fascism. Here you could see already Artur Szyk with his beautiful wife, Lydia Likerman, previous actress, and two children on the left, George and Alexandra. Alexandra now is 92 years old, I shouldn't say because she is a wonderful woman, but I spoke with her yesterday and she sends you best regards. She's living in Florida and she's very happy that we gathered today around the story of her father, with the picture of Lydia Likerman, the wife of Artur Szyk. He became, before the war, very well known as an illustrator of Statute of Kalisz, about which you will hear today as well. And he worked mainly in Poland, but also in France, in England, in Canada for 6 months, and the US. Wherever he lived, he worked and left something about the local country. He always considered himself both as a Pole and the Jew. He changed his name from Szyk to Szyk, which sounds much more Polish. It was kind of the patriotic gesture following the re-establishment of independent Poland after more than 120 years of partitions. He considered himself as a loyal and proud son of Poland and of Polish Jewry. He said, "If I forget you, Poland, let my arm be withered." His famous illumination of Statute of Kalisz, dedicated to Marshal Pilsudski, expressed his Jewish and Polish attitude to somebody who created the Poland after so many years of partition. And here you see some pictures from the Statute of Kalisz with this beautiful Polish eagle, and everything's dedicated to Marshal Pilsudski, and both pictures of Pilsudski were done by Artur Szyk. He became involved in Piłsudski affairs, fighting as an officer of Polish army during war against Bolsheviks in 1920, and he was the author of several posters devoted to fighting against Bolshevik invasion to Poland. And as you could see, he already were fighting with his pencil against the Polish enemy. Kto zdrowy, silny, niech idzie do wojska. Those who is healthy and strong, let him go to the army. And he was whole his life very much devoted to America, because he thought that America is a promised land for everybody from everywhere, including for Poles, from Jews. And this English card of Statute of Kalisz says that. Here is Pulawski, of course, and famous Jew Solomon, who became Minister of Finance at the government of first political government of America. And here is George Washington. Look what a wonderful colors, what a wonderful pictures. And those history of Washington at his time provided me kindly by my very good friend Ivan Ungar, who is sitting here, shows his devotion to America. And before the war, or during the war at the beginning, he emigrated from France to England, and he dedicated wonderfully illuminated Haggadah, the history of the exodus of Jews from Egypt to Promised Land, to King George VI. And here you could see Arthur Szyk with Polish eagle, and it was also political gesture against a famous white paper, which replaced to some extent in May 1939 the previous Balfour Declaration from 1917 of creating Jewish state. And this is a wonderful picture by Arthur Szyk of George VI, which is now in Windsor Palace. Of course, George VI, father of Elizabeth II. Ladies and gentlemen, we are coming now to Arthur Szyk involvement, political involvement and fighting against terror, against Nazis, nationalism during World War II. Here you could see symbolic Attila, chief of Huns, who in 5th century created empire in Eastern and Central Europe. And you see the picture of Hitler, of course, and it was his vision of what was destination of Europe under regime of Hitler. When the Second World War broke up, he was in London, and despite the fact that he and his family was not very religious, he started to pray for Poland, for Jewish subpopulation, 3.5 million in Poland, and he knew already what will happen. He could foresee, because first concentration camp in Dachau was organized already during when Hitler came to power in 1933. So 6 years before, they knew, and whole Europe could foresee what will happen. So we see he's praying Polish soldiers. He underlined that in the Polish 1 million army in September campaign 1939, there were more than 120,000 Jewish soldiers and officers. And they were for the first time using guns to kill Germans already in September 1939. He tried to show to Western opinion what was going on in September campaign in Poland. And here you could see Polish soldier on the right hand supporting already that woman with a child and protecting the praying Jew. On the left hand, he made this gesture to Luftwaffe pilots who bombing civilians. And the title of this, under this graph, means the God don't forgive them because they know what they're doing. Here you could see the soldier defending his town being bombed by Nazis, and you could see a Jewish soldier, a civilian, and the women. And Gloria Victis, Gloria to those who were defeated, and you could see Polish soldiers, German soldiers, and women. And imagine that only 4 months after the war broke out, in January 1940, he already organized in London, in prestigious Fine Arts Society on Bond Street, 72 pictures showing what was going on. He already warned Western opinion what is the consequence of German invasion. This exhibition was called War and Kultur in Poland. Subsequent pictures were published in America already in the book called New Order, showing anti-fascist caricatures. After the war, all those caricatures were put together to the book called Ink and Blood and published in 1946. Several his caricatures were shown on the first pages of American journals, and it was warning to the Western world, the refugees from Poland and the terror against the local population. Here you could see 2 Polish soldiers being wounded after the battle against Nazis, but they protect this Jewish boy. Wonderful pictures of Jewish refugee from campaign and his loving Łódź. You could see the symbol of Łódź crying to some extent with water being damaged by this knife with swastik, and the 2 probably grandparents and the Jewish boy. What a wonderful pictures. I think my not very good English probably disturbing you observing those wonderful pictures. German soldier carrying Jewish and Polish refugees to unknown destiny. And of course, 2 weeks after, or 3 weeks, between 2 and 3 weeks after German invasion, another great power, Soviet Russia, invaded Poland. And here Artur Szyk from London is showing in the middle Polish soldier. Not any other country during the World War II were invaded or attacked from 2 sides by 2 the biggest powers during the time, about 3 million soldiers in almost the same time. But despite this fact, they were fighting for a long 5 weeks. The same time, France 1 year afterwards were fighting against not 2 powers, only Wehrmacht coming not through whole Maginot line, but only through the front, which was only 300 kilometers. In Poland, 1400s. So Szyk was very fond of heroism of Polish soldiers and the tragedy of Jewish population. Here you could see 2 leaders of Soviet Union and Germany, and creating in front of them the terror of local people. A few pictures from this type. Cooperation between Soviets and German, and here Hermann Göring, it's called Comrade Towarzysz Göring, with this typical Bolshevik salute, carrying Cossack dress and Russian fur cap, and it is symbolism that a week before 1st September, both powers agreed for a partition of Poland during next few weeks, and it happened. Fourth partition of Poland, and this is a ruling of general government now, the country created by German, and the symbolism of terror, of annihilation of local people, especially Polish intelligentsia and Jewish population. Those pictures in better enlargement showing so many details. Arthur Szyk was called by many as one-man army, as a soldier in art, as a wartime caricaturist, as a cartoon crusader, as an illuminator, miniaturist, anti-fascist humanist, master of draftsman, artist of freedom, protagonist of elite cause, one-man campaign against Axis, Jewish artist, Polish patriot, champion of American democracy, tireless partisan for Jewish state, freedom fighter, cultural hero, a great communicator and chronicler and defender of Jewish people. So he became so famous during the time that many journals invite him for cover story to make his drawing, to tell soldiers in the whole world fighting against Axis countries to make the world free. And this kind of arts devoted to humanitarian cause and devoted to fighting against the danger of Nazis are very meaningful. Here you could see the two Jewish children receiving the sentence of death from this court, where you could see two generals of Wehrmacht and Gestapo, and the title goes "To be killed as the enemy of Third Reich." Very important cartoon. You could read that there is a report of Gestapo that there are 2 million Jews already killed, and they ask themselves, where are others? We are short of Jews. They intended to kill 11 million of Jews. What we see here, apart from Goering, Goebbels, Hitler, it's dedication to his mother, to the memory of my darling mother murdered by Germans somewhere in Poland. We know that his mother was murdered not far from Łódź, and year after his brother, her daughter were killed as well. Before attacking America in December 1941, 4 of them, leaders of Russia, Italy, Japan and Germany, asking themselves, what we are waiting for? The whole world is ours. And similar picture, and behind you could see the row of crosses. As you know, he was very proud of the Polish secret state, and here he showed Polish soldier and the English East Coast defending from the foreseeing invasion from German invasion from Norway. And in Battle of Britain, you know very well that there was a lot of even Polish pilots and some Jewish pilots from Krakow. We find out recently who were defending Great Britain. But despite the fact of their heroism, about 40,000 Britons were killed by Luftwaffe, which wanted to prepare the German invasion for Great Britain. Even after being defeated under Stalingrad in February 1943, aggression against Jews increased. And here you could see the image of Arthur Szyk telling, who told you I'm not victorious anymore? And here Hitler himself is killing innocent people in ghetto. He was, of course, very fond of Warsaw ghetto, and two pictures are showing this important event. And he showed also the Polish soldiers, Henryk Iwański from Home Army, who entered the ghetto and who helped Jewish fighters. So he always was trying to show this cooperation between Jews and Poles. I'm sorry it's not on big screen, so you could see it better. But still, you could see how, in beautiful way, he's showing the problem of white paper and Balfour Declaration lying here, and the Jews who wanted to escape to Palestine find out the closed door, because only 10,000 Jews per year were allowed, according to white paper declaration, to emigrate to Palestine. He was very fond of Jewish fighters, and he was supported Bergson's idea to create Jewish Legion and so on. I have no time to tell more about that. But imagine one man created more than 1,000, probably 1,200 anti-Nazi caricatures, and they were very well known during World War II. It was kind of his ammunition against Nazis. In cynical way, very beautiful and color pictures are showing the heroism of people fighting against. He was one of a soldier in art. Here, 3 years after September campaign, he salutes Polish soldiers. Also, Poland fight Nazi dragon, and the income from selling such picture, postcards went to Polish war relief. One of his intention was to make the renaissance of the history of Jews from even less than 20 centuries. Here you could see the Persia, King Ahasuerus and his Prime Minister Haman, who wanted to kill all Jews. Luckily it was found out, and instead of Mordecai, the uncle of the wife of the Esther, of the wife of Ahasuerus, instead of the Jews, Mordecai, Haman was hanging, because Esther told her husband, the king of Persia, what was going on. And probably you cannot see it. Here, Arthur Szyk, his auto-portrait, put on Haman's swastika. So it was imagination what will happen with Hitler in Europe. And this beautiful picture against expressing Arthur Szyk attitudes to fighting against Nazis. Here is again Arthur Szyk portrait after Moscow conference, where it was decided that all war criminals will be punished after the war. I don't have time to describe all details like that, but when you will have a time and you will see all details in many albums which are produced by Arthur Szyk Society, you really could spend a lot of time to admire not only artistic style of Arthur Szyk, but also how many messages he's showing after that. Here you could see Arthur Szyk with Eleanor Roosevelt, very close cooperation. I mentioned before that the Battle of Britain, and as you probably remember, famous expression of churches underlying the heroism of the pilot. As you remember, it sounds like that. Never in the history of mankind so many, oh so much to so few. British, Polish, Czech pilots. And there is some connection to this, to Arthur Szyk. It was found out that no other artist could depict so many symbols within so many few inches of space with so much meaning. So you see, as a miniaturist, he could show so many details, so you could observe and discuss and show to our students, as we are doing in Kraków, a picture of General Sikorski, whom he met during Bolshevik War, but afterwards in London, and from his decision he was sent to States for Canada, and Ungar will speak about Canada, so I'll not speak anymore. Paderewski and Copernicus telling, this graph telling that he, of course, was of Polish origin, graph made under invitation of Kościuszko Foundation, and as you know, in Kraków, Poland, the capital of General Government, Germans claim that he was, of course, German astronomer. And the Polish king Władysław Jagiełło, who defeated Teutonic Knights on Grunwald. And Kościuszko, and the beautiful graph of Poland. And Woodward Wilson and Paderewski creating New Poland after First War. In Kraków, in the Palace of Art recently, we performed exhibition about 150 enlargement of Arthur Szyk miniatures, and you could see to what extent we think that he deserved our attention, but still we have very great room to make him worldwide known. He is almost unknown in Poland, in Israel, a little bit more American people are knowledgeable thanks to Ivan Ungar, and Arthur Szyk became American citizens in 1948. Unfortunately, he died at the age of 57 in 1951. But still, the variety of his graphs and the wonderful message which comes out of great humanist, great Pole, great Jew, the man of the world, deserved our attention. And it was Purim, you see, Jewish people were famous Jewish festival in Purim, so they came dressed. And so for the first time, probably in the 1,000th history of the presence of Jews in Poland, Krakowian intelligentsia, mayor of Kraków, were taking part in very Jewish holiday Purim. And the background of that was Arthur Szyk. You could see how many people took part, a little bit more than here. Today it was about 250 people on this exhibition of Palace of Art of art in Kraków. Oh, again, you see, Ivan Ungar I was very honored to host him recently in Kraków, and he was afterwards in the exhibition in Łódź and afterwards in Vilnius. And you see those pictures, graphs of Arthur Szyk on the first pages of so many journals. Thanks very much. Picture of you, I'm showing Kraków, okay? Thank you very much. Do we have intermission? Am I
Yes, after the next presentation.
Oh, after the next presentation. Okay, sorry.
this time will be the team presentation. My daughter and my assistant Suzanne will take care of the text, so I could concentrate on the slides and on the presentation of the Statute of Kalisz.
So good afternoon. In this part of our conference, you will witness the presentation of the latest edition of a facsimile of the Statute of Kalisz, and it is the first edition in the past 80 years. So today's launch of the latest edition of the statute will be the first in the world. Our lovely city in the shadow of Mount Royal has surpassed, under this regard, the royal city of Kraków, where the statute will be promoted with the participation of the city's president just before the holidays. So this was made possible through the efforts of Professor Skotnicki from the Jagiellonian University in Kraków, who is with us today. The latest edition of the statute had just finished printing last Thursday, and on Friday already, it was in the professor's suitcase, traveling with him to attend our conference. So, thank you very much. It would be possible to have a separate conference just about the Statute of Kalisz. Because of time constraints, I will focus on explaining on what Artur Szyk emphasized while writing the statute, the historical background, and just how unique the latest edition is. So our artist, Artur Szyk, was living in the mid-1920s in Paris. While busy with several other projects, Szyk began the illumination of what later proved to be his major masterpiece. He became both a scribe and illustrator, combining calligraphy with decorated initials, bordures, and miniature painting. He chose to eliminate a document testifying to the tolerance existing in 13th century Poland, the Statute of Kalisz of guarantees, privileges, and fair treatment to Jews. The statute led to the creation of a Yiddish-speaking autonomous Jewish nation within a nation. Szyk was working during a very politically charged time. Post-war anti-Semitism had not diminished, and despite vague official declarations, equal rights for Jews remained a dream. Some government organizations did not conceal their anti-Semitic views. Szyk hoped that with the new government of Marshal Józef Piłsudski, established following the May coup of 1926, things would change. Piłsudski declared that all Polish citizens, regardless of their race or religion, should have equal rights and opportunity for the building of a strong country. Szyk's positive attitude to the Piłsudski government was so strong that he dedicated the statue to the Marshal. The painter became truly absorbed in illustrating the Statute of Kalisz and drew elements of his personal life into it. This is proven by two self-portraits contained in the manuscript, as well as miniatures, including portrait of his wife and children. He also dedicated one of the larger miniatures to his son, a picture of the dying Berek Jusalewicz. That Jewish officer fought in Napoleon's army for Poland's freedom and was decorated with the French Legion of Honor and the Virtuti Militari. As well, a miniature at the bottom of the page depicting the events of 1905 is entitled My Childhood Memory. Szyk supported the anti-Russian national revolt, although he had been a mere boy at that time. He dedicated the miniature to his hometown, Łódź. Illuminations of the Statute of Kalisz are specific due to their varied symbolism, where the author used historical and mythological themes. In direct relation to the text is the coat of arms of ancient Polish regions. A picture of St. George slaying the dragon was borrowed from European traditional icons. The knight's shield bears the white eagle, which gives the saint a Polish character. Another symbol depicting the meaning of the statute is the scales of justice, which the artist inserted between the Latin and the French columns of the text. The scales, separating a miniature picture of the Torah amidst the lines of Judah and the white eagle, kept a balance between the two, just as the statute regulated relations between Jews and Christians. The Statute of Kalisz was inspired by Western European manuscripts painted in the late medieval times. Jean Fouquet's Jewish Antiquities was of particular significance to Szyk, as one of the few manuscripts in the Western canon which depicted the stories of the Jews. Equally, there are analogies between religious tolerance, of which the medieval document is proof, and contemporary events. The American flag is shown at least 5 times, for Szyk believed that the states were a symbol of freedom and equality. He recalled Kazimierz Pulaski and Haym Salomon, who fought for American independence. Their pictures are next to St. George with the dragon. The artist painted his illuminations on a light brown paper suggesting ancient books. Szyk used some vivid, fresh, and light colors, contrasting with the color of the paper. Because of a creative combination, the colors seemed even more intense. Moreover, the manuscript abounds in gold and silver, while most illustrations have borders drawn in minute detail. All the color scenes illustrating the manuscript are very meticulous, almost overfilled with details. The pictures, in spite of this, seem transparent, and their message can easily be grasped. Szyk felt obliged to portray the likeness of Polish kings and Jewish heroes in the statute. However, the artist chose friends and close relatives as models for his biblical and fictional characters. It is hard to find any historical portraits in Szyk's earlier works. The Statute of Kalisz is the first work in which the otherwise pedantic artist tried to preserve the authenticity of the document. Work on the Statute of Kalisz lasted 2 years. These 2 years were hard for Artur Szyk and his family. He often had to go without a slice of bread in order to spend his last pennies on parchment, gold, and paints required for his Benedictine masterpiece. The statute, when finished, was exhibited towards the end of 1928 at the third Szyk exhibition in the Decor Gallery. The vernissage was a great success, as reported by the popular Pologne Literaire, the foreign edition of Wiadomości Literackie, promoting Polish culture in the West and subsidized by the Polish Foreign Office. All Paris came to admire Szyk's work. The exhibition almost exclusively displayed the 43 illuminated pages of the Statute of Kalisz. Aside from the statute, a one-page manuscript showing the contribution of Jewish scientists is found in founding the Charles the Great University was also on display. A huge initial shows the Holy Roman Emperor with 3 rabbis on his left and a soldier to his right. The illustration is accompanied by a brief text in 6 languages. The left bottom corner, between some ornate borders, shows a tiny portrait of the artist wearing a beret. The artist dedicated this work to the French Jews. It was owned by the Bibliothèque Nationale. Roland Marcel, director of the Bibliothèque Nationale, called the illuminations of the Statute of Kalisz a masterpiece, believing they rate their artists at par with the best illustrators of the 16th century. Both the mind and eye are equally satisfied, he said. Since that exhibition in 1925, Szyk became a truly Jewish artist whom he always wished to be. Not merely a man brought up in the Jewish tradition, but a creator with an obligation to his roots, transmitting the values of his race and its message to the world. Deluxe copies of the Statute of Kalisz were issued by the Édition de la Table Ronde de Paris, the first enterprise founded by the artist himself for the publishing and distribution of his works. The name of the firm, reminiscent of the legend about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, linked modernity with the perpetual quest for peace and equality. In 1932, the Statute of Kalisz was published by as a collector's luxury item, limited to 500 copies. In the next 80 years, there was no new edition of the statute. Because of the way that Szyk painted the statute, to preserve its original character and beauty, it would have been a very costly edition. It was only on the 80th anniversary of the Paris edition that the Warsaw publishing house, Grafika, took that risk. Attached to the newest edition is the book, The History of the Statute of Kalisz. It is the work of 4 authors, Marian Fuchs, Aleksander Skotnicki, Joanna Podolska, Marek Szukalak, who analyzed the symbolism and history in the works of the greatest 20th century illuminator. In the first part, we will find the history of the creation of the statute, the genealogy of Polish royalty, as well as of those who are currently taking care of the heritage of Artur Szyk. Furthermore, we can familiarize ourselves with the paragraphs of the Statute of Kalisz in their original, as well as their translated versions. The publication contains the bibliography linked to Artur Szyk and the Statute of Kalisz, as well as photographies from the life of the author. It also mentions other achievements of the artist. The current edition is the fruit of the determination of the head of Grafika, Miss Iwona Knechta, who wished success in spreading such an important work, which was the model of Polish Jewish and American European cooperation, as will conclude today's speaker, Professor Aleksander Skotnicki. Thank you for your attention.